How do you value Bitcoin? And how are people currently valuing or predicting Bitcoin? 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, a million, 1.5 million, 10 million. They've all been predicted. But what's most important is who's making the predictions. And we'll talk about that at the end. First, let's talk about how do you actually value Bitcoin, or how do you value anything for that matter? Well, most people will say the value of something is what someone will pay for it. We've all heard that. We'll talk about valuing 5 different things. First, let's talk about equities or stocks. What do you typically look at when you're valuing a stock? There's many different ways to do it. Value investing, and then those, of course, that look at technical analysis trying to determine future price. Well, when you value something like a stock, the value is essentially number of shares times the price per share, and that's the total value of the company. You look at the financials. If they're public, they're going to have quarterly reports. You can look at their expenses. You can look at their revenue. And popular things when it comes to value investing are, for example, price to earnings. What's the price of the stock compared to the earnings? And then you look at other companies in that industry to see their growth rates, to see what type of a PE actually makes sense. Well, what's interesting about stocks is that a company has what's called a float. Not all the shares of the company are available on the public market. A percentage of them are available. 2 things about that. The company can buy shares back at any point in time. If there's 3 million shares on the public market, and that's what's trading, they can buy back a couple 100,000, 1 million, whatever they want. They can also, at any point in time, issue more shares. If the total outstanding shares is 10 million, and there's 3 million on the public market, they could issue another 1 million shares. So they can change amount that's available at any point in time. All right, now let's talk about technical analysis. Technical analysis is slightly different. It's not looking at the financials per se. It's looking at the price. It's looking at volume. And then, of course, it's applying mathematical formulas to see if what's happened in the past might then again be predictive of what could happen in the future. And you'll hear things like volume precedes price. They want to see, for example, that the price goes through a certain resistance level, but they also want to see that that happens with a certain amount of volume. So that's a way of trying to predict the future price. So when it comes to Bitcoins versus equities, you can continually issue more if you want. Bitcoin has 21 million. That's it. There won't be any more. They can't create more. Companies also, of course, supply a product or a service, and they have expenses and they have revenue. That's not Bitcoin. Okay. Secondly, let's talk about commodities, because the SEC says, well, Bitcoin is more like a commodity. Let's just focus on probably the most well-known, gold. Well, maybe something like oil, but let's focus on gold. I think it's the best analogy because gold is seen as a store of value. Now, you can go online and look, and because there are a lot of people that will explain the differences between gold and Bitcoin and go into great detail. My favorite is Michael Saylor, MicroStrategy CEO. I'm assuming, and I think he's probably a genius, but the way he describes and explains it is like no other. There's many videos about the interviews with him. Let's just focus on the fact that gold has an unlimited supply. They say that there's about 240,000 metric tons of gold that has been taken from the ground. And that's in the form of either gold bars or jewelry or gold plating of electronics, whatever it may have been used for. And I believe there's somewhere around 50,000 tons still left to be unearthed. Of course, that's an estimate. Bottom line is there's more gold and it's being extracted from the ground every year. Almost at the moment an unlimited supply. There must be a limit, but no one knows really what that is. So the price of gold is based on the public market, right? And it's looked at as a store of value. Bitcoin also looked at as a store of value. However, Bitcoin has a limited supply. Bitcoin is also known or called the digital gold. Obviously, it's much easier to transfer and to purchase and to sell than, let's say, a physical gold bar. So we'll talk about the estimates on price and how Bitcoin can relate to gold in a moment. 2 more things to look at in relation to assets, and that is real estate as well as collectibles such as art or cars. When it comes to something like art or cars, two things come to mind. One, someone has to actually want that piece of art. If I draw something and I say, there's only one of these, you want to buy it, you'll look at it and say, no, I don't. But there is art that people love that's very desirable. So what determines the price? Well, what determines the price is that many people want it, and scarcity says there's only one of them. It goes to auction, and the price goes up and up and up. And the same thing with cars. Real estate, well, I actually heard Michael Saylor say that Bitcoin is like digital real estate. It's even easier to move. Actually, it's only possible to move Bitcoin across state lines or country lines or whatever it may be. You're not going to be able to pick up your building out of New York and take it with you. So when it comes to real estate, there are many factors that determine its value. Okay, so we talked about stocks, equities. We talked about commodities like gold, real estate, and collectibles like art. And what's interesting is that with relation to stocks, like we said, can you issue more stock? Yes. Can you pull more gold out of the ground? Yes. Can you mine more than 21 million Bitcoin? No. That's a variable that is really hard to determine how that's going to affect the price of Bitcoin. And it might be the variable that allows it to drive to astronomical prices. No one really knows because nothing has been done like this before. Or I should say nothing has been available with the attributes of Bitcoin before or in the past. So we have nothing to look at and say, well, it's very similar to this, so therefore the price will behave that way. Okay, then what's the best way, or what can we do with what we know to try to determine a Bitcoin price? Let's talk about the bottom and the top. All right, what's the bottom of Bitcoin's price? $0. It could go to $0. What's the top? Well, we don't really know. Not true. To start, let's just look at gold. Gold is shown at 12 trillion. If you were to take 21 million Bitcoin and you said Bitcoin will hit 12 trillion as well, and you divide 12 trillion by 21 million Bitcoin, you're going to get a little over $570,000 per Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin just reaches the total market cap of gold in terms of investable assets, it'll be 570,000. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. You've probably seen many articles talking about how fast the spot ETFs that were recently approved have grown. They grew at an unbelievable rate as compared to gold, much faster. Money moved much faster into the Bitcoin spot ETFs than they had in the past for gold. So that's a marker that I think is obvious. 570,000 shouldn't be too hard if it just matches gold. Now take a look at this chart of the amount of money, the trillions of dollars in real estate and in bonds. To me, those are two areas where people could very easily start to divest assets and move them over into Bitcoin. Let's just say that another $12 trillion moved. That's not a lot compared to how much is currently in those two categories. That would double the size. Instead of 12 trillion in Bitcoin, it would be 24 trillion in Bitcoin. Double the size of gold. What does that mean? Well, now you've got Bitcoin at over $1 million. So when you hear Bitcoin can be over $1 million, you might think, that's crazy. That makes no sense. I don't understand that. Well, now, based on the total assets available, you can see how 1 million Bitcoin could very easily happen. I want to throw another stat at you. Over 8 billion people in the world. But more importantly, let's look at the number of millionaires in the world. And why am I saying in the world? Well, because Bitcoin can be bought, sold, transferred by anyone, anywhere in the blink of an eye. Okay, so 59 million millionaires. If each millionaire bought Bitcoin and you divided it, 59 million by 21 million Bitcoin, that means that each millionaire can only have 0.35 Bitcoin in their portfolio. Obviously, if they're millionaires, they're probably going to have diversified their portfolio of assets, bonds, cash, commodities, real estate, equities, and now Bitcoin. But they can only have 0.35 each. Now, look at real estate or bonds or any of the things I've mentioned, you can make more real estate. You can issue more bonds. You can pull more gold out of the ground. You can't make more Bitcoin. That is one thing that we can't change. So when I look at it and I say, could the total get to 12 trillion market cap or 24 trillion? And I think, well, there's no more. It's scarcity. And then I realize that there's 59 million millionaires and they're each only going to have 0.35 Bitcoin. If we were divided up, that gives you an idea when it comes to supply and demand, that if it's in demand, the price could go astronomical, and we really have no idea. So let's look at some of the people that have made predictions on Bitcoin's price. I'm just going to talk about 4. The CTO of Coinbase and Robert Kiyosaki, rich dad, poor dad, who has all sorts of real estate, and he talks about commodities like gold and silver and also Bitcoin. They both have predicted, and you'll see links to these articles below, but Bitcoin of being $1 million. I don't think that's unreasonable. We just showed that if we just had 24 trillion, which is twice gold and way less than real estate bonds and anything else, that would be about $1 million doing the math. Okay. 2 other people, ARK Investments, Cathie Wood, she said that by 2030, she believes it could hit $1 million. We just showed that, yeah, that could be possible. And who knows if it's 2030 or not. Could be faster. Then there's Michael Saylor. Michael Saylor has been quoted with many different predictions. The article below, I don't know how valid it is. It says that he said at one point it could be $10 million. I'm not sure if he's really predicting $10 million or he's making the point that I'm trying to make in this video, that we have nothing in the past that we can compare to Bitcoin and be able to say, well, it's going to follow that pattern. We don't know. The scarcity of 21 million. Last point, I read an article that was very interesting that said, yes, 21 million Bitcoin. However, some people have lost Bitcoin. They've lost those addresses. Some of it is locked up. It may never be released. What is it? The original Satoshi, I think they said has 1 million. So anyway, they did some math and I think they came up with somewhere between 18 and 19 million, meaning there may only be 18 to 19 million available. It may be less than we originally think because of these various factors. So the point of this whole video is, I personally, and this is not financial advice, I am not a financial advisor, I have no idea where Bitcoin's going. Could it go to zero? Sure. But could it go, as they say, to the moon? Yes, because we have no clue what's going to happen with a scarce asset in high demand. If demand pushes this up, it may never end. It may never stop going up in price. Down below in the comments if you disagree with me, you don't like my math, but if you think there's a model out there that fits Bitcoin where we can lay it on top of one another and say that's what's going to happen, great. I don't think it exists. I see people with technical analysis look at the past and try to predict the future, but I think we're moving into an area now that may not be predictable because I don't think it's going to follow past patterns.